You never thought it would happen to you, not after everything you gave. Not after the years you spent building a home with your own two hands, only to watch your own son sign it away while you slept 2 miles down the road, in a narrow bed, in a room that smelled like bleach and forgotten people. Your name is Warrick Danvers. You are 78 years old, and for most of your life, you were the kind of man people leaned on. A machinist by trade, a widower by circumstance, a father by choice you never once regretted, until the day you woke up in room 114 of Brightholm Care Center and realized the house on Larch Avenue, the one you built with your bare hands after the war, the one where your late wife Coraline had planted rose bushes along the fence, was no longer yours. Let me back up. Let me tell you how a good man's life gets sold out from under him. One polite smile, one forged signature, one betrayal at a time. If stories like this move you, if you believe people who've been wronged deserve to be seen, hit subscribe before we go further. Because what happened to Warrick is happening to someone's father right now, and somebody needs to know the truth still finds its way home. Warrick had lived on Larch Avenue for 46 years. He built the house himself in 1979, laying the foundation with his own calloused hands, teaching himself carpentry from library, books because he couldn't afford a contractor and refused to raise his family in anything less than something he was proud of. Coraline used to say the house had a heartbeat, because Warrick built it with so much love that it seemed to breathe when the wind moved. Through the oak trees out front, they raised one son there, Preston Wexley, and Coraline's maiden name, which Warrick had insisted on giving their boy as a middle name, out of respect for her family, though everyone just called him Preston. Warrick worked double shifts at the machine shop for 18 years to put Preston through college. He skipped vacations. He drove a truck with a cracked windshield for a decade because every spare dollar went toward Preston's tuition, Preston's books, Preston's future. And Preston had done well for himself. An insurance adjuster now, married to a sharp, ambitious woman named Marnie, with a daughter, Sable, who Warrick adored more than anything else on this earth. For years things seemed fine. Sunday dinners, birthday calls, the occasional visit that felt a little shorter each year, a little more distracted, but Warrick never complained. He told himself that was just how life worked. Children grow, they get busy, they build their own worlds. Then Coraline passed 3 years ago, and something in the house went quiet that never came back. Warrick started forgetting things. Small things at first, where he put his keys, whether he'd taken his blood pressure medication. He chalked it up to grief. But then came the day he left the stove burning for 6 hours and didn't notice until the smoke alarm screamed him awake from a nap. Preston found out from a neighbor. He drove over that same week, sat Warrick down at the kitchen table Warrick himself had built, and said the words that would end up changing everything. "Dad, I think it's time we look into some help. Just temporary, just so you're safe." Warrick remembers nodding. He remembers feeling relieved. Actually, relieved that his son cared enough to worry, relieved that someone was going to take some of the weight off his shoulders. He trusted Preston completely. Why wouldn't he? He'd given that boy everything he had. 2 weeks later, Warrick moved into Brightholm Care Center, just temporary. Preston had promised, "Just until we get you steady again." "Dad," Preston helped him pack a single suitcase. He told Warrick not to worry about the house, that he'd keep an eye on it, that everything would be handled. Warrick believed him. That was his first mistake, trusting the boy he'd raised, to be honest, not realizing that somewhere between college graduation and his own mounting debts, Preston had become someone else entirely. The first few weeks at Brightholm were disorienting but tolerable. Warrick had a roommate, a quiet man named Otway Finch, a retired postal worker, with a dry sense of humor and a habit of narrating the weather like it was breaking news. Warrick and Otway became fast friends, playing checkers in the common room, complaining about the bland food, watching old westerns on the ancient television bolted to the wall. But Preston's visits grew shorter, then less frequent, then non-existent. Warrick called the house one afternoon, just to check on things. He'd left some tools in the garage he wanted Preston to hold on to, tools that had belonged to his own father. The number rang and rang. No answer. He tried again the next day. Same thing. He asked one of the nurses, a warm, sharp-eyed woman named Junia Aldridge, if she could help him look something up online. Junia had worked at Brightholm for 9 years and had seen every version of family neglect there was to see. But something about Warrick's case gnawed at her in a way most didn't. "What am I looking for, Mr. Danvers?" she asked, pulling up a browser on the shared tablet. "My address," Warrick said. 1442 Larch Avenue. Just see if the listing's still up for the roof repair I asked about before I moved here." Junia typed it in, and there it was. Not a roofing estimate. A real estate listing. Sold, 3 bedrooms, 2 baths. Beautifully maintained mid-century home on a quiet street. Move-in ready. Photos of his living room, his kitchen, the mantel where Coraline's photo used to sit. All of it staged with someone else's furniture. Someone else's life now layered over his. Warrick stared at the screen for a long time. Junia watched. His face changed from confusion to something quieter and far more devastating. "Mr. Danvers," she said gently, "do you want me to call someone for you?" He shook his head. "No," he said. "I need to call my son." Preston didn't answer that day. Or the next. On the third day, Marnie picked up instead. Her voice clipped and rehearsed, like she'd practiced this conversation in a mirror. "Warrick, I think it's best if Preston explains everything when the time is right. There's a lot going on financially, and this was the responsible decision for the family." "The family," Warrick repeated. "I built that house for the family. I gave you people everything I had." "We'll talk soon," Marnie said, and the line went dead. That night, Warrick didn't sleep. He lay in the narrow bed at Brightholm and stared at the water-stained ceiling tiles, doing the math in his head. 46 years of memories. Sold for a price he didn't even know. Without a signature he remembered giving. Without a conversation, without so much as a warning. He thought about Coraline's roses out front. He wondered if the new owners had already torn them out. The next morning he asked Junia for help again, this time to find a lawyer. Junia connected him with a legal aid attorney named Cormac Delacroix, a soft-spoken but relentless man who specialized in elder financial abuse cases. Cormac visited Warrick at Brightholm with a folder of documents he'd pulled from the county recorder's office, and what he found made his jaw tighten as he read it aloud. 6 months before Warrick moved into the care facility, Preston had filed paperwork requesting power of attorney over his father's affairs, using a signature that Cormac immediately flagged as inconsistent with 3 decades of Warrick's notarized documents. The POA had been filed quietly, approved through a rubber stamp process that nobody had bothered to verify. And once it was active, Preston had used it to list and sell the Larch Avenue house for $210,000, nearly $90,000 under its actual market value, sold fast and quiet to a buyer connected to one of Marnie's co-workers, who flipped it 2 months later for a $50,000 profit. The money hadn't gone toward Warrick's care. Brightholm's bills, Cormac discovered, had been paid out of Warrick's modest pension and Social Security. Not a cent from the house sale. The proceeds, after a suspiciously large processing fee, had gone straight into an account under Preston and Marnie's names. Records showed the money vanishing within weeks, a down payment on a lake house, a luxury SUV, a private school deposit for Sable. Warrick sat across from Cormac in the Brightholm visiting room, hands folded in his lap, absorbing the details like a man watching his own house burn down for a second time. "He used my signature," Warrick said quietly. "He forged my signature to steal my home." "It looks that way," Cormac said. "And, Mr. Danvers, I want to be honest with you. Cases like this are winnable, but it takes time and it takes you being willing to go through with it, even against your own son." Warrick was quiet for a long moment. Then he looked up, and something in his eyes had shifted. Grief giving way to something sturdier. "I built that house with my hands," he said. "I'll fight for it with what's left of them." The case moved slower than Warrick would have liked. The way these things always do. Depositions, forensic handwriting analysis, subpoenaed bank records. But Cormac was thorough, and Junia, who had become something like family to Warrick over those difficult months, made sure he never faced a single appointment alone. She drove him to meetings on her days off. She held his hand in the elevator before hearings. She believed him when the rest of his own blood had decided it was easier not to. The forensic handwriting. Expert confirmed what Cormac already suspected. The signature on the power of attorney form did not match Warrick's. Not even close, the pressure and slant. Inconsistent with decades of his handwriting on file with the county. Bank records showed Preston accessing his father's accounts using login information he'd taken without permission months before the temporary move to Brightholm was ever suggested. It hadn't been a sudden decision made out of desperation. It had been planned. When the case finally reached mediation, Preston appeared with an attorney of his own. Sharper suit, tighter smile. The same practiced calm his wife had used on the phone months earlier. He barely looked at his father, not once. Warrick watched his son avoid his eyes across the conference table and felt something inside him go still and cold. Not rage exactly, but the quiet, permanent kind of sorrow that settles into a person's chest and never fully leaves. The mediator laid out the evidence. The forged signature, the undervalued sale, the missing funds. Preston's attorney tried to argue. Diminished capacity on Warrick's part had justified. Swift action of the same. Memory lapses that had sent him to Brightholm in the first place now weaponized against him as proof he couldn't be trusted to manage his own affairs. But Cormac was ready. He presented medical records showing Warrick's mild cognitive symptoms were being actively treated. The doctors had assessed him as fully competent to manage his own decisions at every point during the relevant timeline. He presented Junia's written statement, describing a man who played sharp, strategic games of checkers twice a week, who remembered every resident's birthday on the floor, who had asked pointed, lucid questions the moment he learned something was wrong. The room went quiet after that. Preston's attorney had nothing left to argue. The settlement, when it came, wasn't just financial, though the court did order Preston to repay the difference between the sale price and market value, along with the misappropriated pension funds with interest. It was the public record of it that mattered more to Warrick. The forged power of attorney was voided. The sale was formally recognized as fraudulent, and for the first time in 9 months, Warrick Danvers' name was cleared of the quiet, humiliating fiction that he had simply given his home away. Preston never apologized. Not really. He sent one letter, weeks after the ruling, full of excuses about financial pressure and Marnie's job loss and how he'd meant to pay it back eventually. Warrick read it once at the small kitchenette table in the studio apartment he moved into after Brightholm. A modest place, but his own. Purchased with what remained of the settlement, and then folded it carefully and placed it in a drawer. He didn't need to respond. Some silences say more than any answer ever could. What Warrick hadn't expected was Sable. She was 14 now, old enough to understand more than her parents realized, and old enough to be furious when she finally pieced together what her father had done. She started visiting her grandfather on her own, taking the bus after school, sitting with him while he told her stories about building the house on Larch Avenue, about the roses her grandmother had planted, about the tools that had belonged to his own father before him. The same tools. Preston had also sold off in an estate sale Warrick never authorized. "I want to learn," Sable told him one afternoon, examining an old hand plane Warrick had somehow tracked down and bought back from a flea market seller who'd purchased it at that same estate sale. "I want you to teach me how to build something." Warrick looked at his granddaughter for a long moment, feeling something in his chest loosen for the first time in nearly a year. "All right," he said, "but we start with the basics. Just like I did." Junia still visits him sometimes, on weekends. Bringing coffee and news from Brightholm, Otway asks about him constantly, still narrating the weather to whoever will listen. Cormac checks in every few months, more out of genuine care than professional obligation at this point. And Warrick, slowly, is rebuilding. Not the house on Larch Avenue, which now belongs to strangers who will never know its story, but something else. A life that is smaller, but entirely unmistakably his own. He thinks about forgiveness sometimes late at night, the way people do when the past refuses to stay quiet. He hasn't gotten there yet with Preston, and he isn't sure he ever fully will. But he has gotten somewhere close to peace, which he has come to understand is its own kind of victory, the kind nobody can forge a signature to take away. A house built with love can be stolen, but the truth it was built on cannot be sold.